Magisters.
I understand
Ibrahim said with deliberate slowness.
that Bokerfors has not yet finished his business in the land of the English.
The Moor's hand drifted lazily in time with the faint music that poured forth from the house as he leaned over the railing and gazed south over the sea. "He has finished his business, good Ibrahim," the Moor's companion replied. "It is his pleasure that he follows now, with his child and the training thereof." Seated and holding a goblet of what might have passed to distance for wine, Yusuf followed his friend's gaze over the waters. "Are you really that anxious for his return?" Ibrahim's handsome features twisted into a frown.
Not for his sake, no, but to see an end to this bickering. Montano and the others, even our father. The old ones can't be bothered with resolving this. They just laugh and compare the whole matter to something they saw among the Romans. And then they go back to their dances and schemes for 100 years hence. Bokeforce is the only one with his feet in this century.
The other vampire idly stirred his drink with a long, thin finger. "Are you so anxious to accept the Greeks' ruling, just for the sake of having matters over and done with? There's more to you than that, my friend." He took his finger from the drink and sucked on it blissfully for a moment, then returned to his idle staring. The Moor shrugged eloquently.
What else is there? Discover what the Greybeards would have us do, then dance their steps to the best of our abilities. To act otherwise is to invite the longest sleep, is it not? I just wish an end to this bickering between we children. By the dozens we claw each other's eyes out, and for nothing. All our plans will be for naught as soon as Bokeforce or one of the other wither blossoms masquerading as our elders deigns to tell us what to do.
"And what?" said the seated man, leaning forward with a terrible light in his eyes. "If you could change that." Ibrahim snorted in disbelief.
You've been alone with your poems too long, Yusuf. What could I do?
"Make the decision for them. Unify the younger ones under your banner. Present Bucafos, when he finishes his sojourn, with a deed already done. And if the old ones care so little for our Al-Andalus as to ignore its disposition, then you have nothing to fear from them.
But to act would be to usurp their privilege.
Or perhaps they have deliberately left this opportunity available, to see who will be so bold as to seize it," Yusuf said.
It could be.
The Moor turned back to the sea, looking at the distant silhouette of a ship making for the African shore.
It could well be, but...
And he turned once again.
Why do you tell me this, old friend? We're of an age in the blood. Why pass the cup on to me, instead of taking it for yourself?
Yusuf shrugged. "Would you believe that it is because you're better suited for it? I miss Al-Mutamid's gardens and musics, the poets he'd invite to read to us. That was my age, Ibrahim. I'm not a soldier or a king. I'm a courtier, from a court long gone."
Patience, Yusuf. There will be other poet kings for you to grace with your presence.
But none like Seville's was. A bird escaped from Allah's gardens for an evening sojourn on earth. Those eyes, that mouth.
And he ended that night driving the donkeys of his conquerors. Well, perhaps not.
Ibrahim frowned.
But you still haven't answered my question.
Yusuf regarded his friend for a long moment. "You truly wish to know? Very well then. I believe this inaction on the part of our elders to be deliberate. They are testing us, Ibrahim, looking to see who among us will seize the moment. They want to see who is worthy of survival. Those who fail will be culled, like stallions incapable of speed when the wolf draws near."
Or perhaps,
Ibrahim said softly.
They wish to see which of us might eventually prove a threat.
There was a silence for a long moment. Yusuf put his goblet on the polished wood of the tabletop and stood. "Perhaps," he said. "I had not thought of that."
You hadn't?
Ibrahim quirked an eyebrow.
Prophet's beard, Yusuf. You're a better liar than that.
Yusuf blushed, a very human action, to which Ibrahim only laughed.
Oh, don't be so serious, little courtier. I can see now what you intended. That I should work to unify our squabbling siblings, and that in gratitude for your suggestion I would keep you close to me. Then, when Delgado and Tariq and the rest of the old ones plucked my flower for fear of finding it a bitter weed, you would be there, my humble vizier, the safe choice to assume my position. Is this what you had intended?
Yusuf stammered and took a step back. "Ibrahim, surely you cannot suspect me of this. 200 years we have spent as friends. All of Al-Andalus would not tempt me to betray that."
Probably for the best then, poet.
The tall Moor said as he turned back to the sea.
For I don't think any of us will have Al-Andalus to offer you.
A chill breeze whistled in off the water, and far below spray danced at the top of the waves.
An interesting effort, Yusuf. But you had more subtlety 100 years ago. You're getting old.
As are you, Ibrahim. 100 years ago, you would have killed me on the mere suspicion. Yusuf picked up his goblet and contemplated the workmanship. Perhaps it is for the best. Ibrahim drummed his fingers on the railing.
Perhaps it is. So, Yusuf, when do you think Bokerfos will return? Usurpers. They say that the bones of Saint Cuthbert rest not far from here, Merlinda said, her low voice barely breaking the cold, crisp silence of the autumn evening. She stood at the window of her tower room, from which she could see the stately outline of Durham Cathedral silhouetted against the moonlit sky. In her hands she held a chased silver goblet, now empty of the warm, rich vitae that served as her only sustenance. "Do you believe the tales, lady?" Geraint de Montfort asked as he came to stand beside her at the window. His gaze, like hers, fastened on the nearby abbey. The young man, ghouled to her service as an apprentice and companion since a few nights after her arrival in this god-forsaken part of England, had helped to secure the tower she now occupied and served as the Tremere Chantry. Merlinda stole a glance at him from the corner of her eye. Geraint seemed composed despite his knowledge of this night's importance in his life. Such equanimity in the face of the elaborate ritual of exsanguination and infusion that comprised the Tremere embrace would stand him in good stead during his first nights as a Cainite. Merlinda had schooled him carefully, preparing him for his transformation. Soon, he would demonstrate the degree of his attentiveness to her lessons. Merlinda shrugged. "It matters little," she said. "Once, long before you were born, I might have sought diligently for such a treasure, as much to deprive the church of a plaything as for whatever power those bones contained. But now—" She raised her own goblet before her, in imitation of the priestly elevation of the sacramental chalice. "This provides me with all the magical nourishment I require." She handed the goblet to Geraint and turned away from the window. "Attend to your duties now," she told her apprentice. "I expect you to have resolved any unfinished business that remains to you before you return to me. I will see you after the midnight candle mark." Geraint bowed and left the room. A small desk in the center of the room held a pair of open scrolls, letters, one from the chantry at Sioris, and the other from France. Merlinda seated herself at the desk and picked up the first of the missives, sighing as she reread Etrius's angled script. As usual, her fellow Cainite's message contained his customary misgivings about his woeful state of unlife. With the first words, Merlinda shook her head ruefully. Atreus would never change. His horror at the price of gaining immortality had not lessened with the passing of over a century. Neither had his anger at Goratrix, the instigator of the grand experiment that had transformed the leaders of House Tremere from mortal magi to immortal children of Cain. Her lips moved as her eyes passed over the passages of Atreus's letter and found the news that he dutifully conveyed to her. Our master spends much time in the deep slumber that we have learned to call torpor. The nightly management of our affairs increasingly falls upon my shoulders. I begin to wonder just how wise it was for us to remain in these forsaken mountains, surrounded as we are by the hostile forces that would like nothing better than to see our complete annihilation. I speak, of course, of the Zemisi. I fear we have traded our diminishing powers as mortal magi for an insecure place in a dark and unholy society that does not welcome us. We work feverishly to unlock the thaumaturgical knowledge so vital to our survival, yet our rituals seem paltry in comparison with the true magic we have sacrificed upon the altar of our greed. By day, we receive no respite. While we pass the sunlit hours in a tormented sleep of the damned, the fiend's mortal servants scour the mountain passes for signs of our resting places. They are joined in this by the minions of the church, who send their knights against us. Only our wards and the inaccessibility of our halls serve to protect us, and I fear the time will soon come when even those precautions fail. My only joy in this pitiful shadow life lies in the knowledge that Goratrix no longer haunts these halls. Yet even that solace is tempered by my fear of what new inquiries his foul intelligence now pursues. France is not far enough away for my liking. The rest of the letter contains solicitous inquiries about Merlinda's own position and requests for news concerning the world outside Sioris, particularly with regard to the activities of Goratrix. Merlinda smiled and put the scroll aside, turning her attention to the second letter. This one, from Goratrix and his chantry in France, differed from Atreus's communication in several significant aspects. Most prominent was the author's approach to his existence. Rather than lamenting his changed status, Goratrix gloried in his transformed state. You and I are fortunate to have escaped the confines of the barbarian countryside for more civilized climes. I have had my fill of listening to Atreus's constant moaning about our pitiful half-life, as he calls it. You know as well as I that we have attained a transformation beyond our most potent imaginings. More than ever, the breathing world and its puny inhabitants have become as children's toys in our hands. So far removed have we grown from their petty concerns that we need no longer trouble ourselves with aught beyond the pursuit of knowledge and the power attendant upon it. A long self-laudatory passage followed in which Goratrix described his latest alchemical experiment upon his toys. Merlinda grimaced as she read his words with gruesome fascination. Laying aside both scrolls, she sat in contemplation of the answers she would inscribe to both her fellow Tremere. Her distance from the heart of her clan had not lessened her involvement in the ongoing dispute between Atreus and Goratrix. Both still looked to her for advice, and as usual she would give it, cautioning each of them to remember their common blood and the bonds that served to unite them in the face of growing enmity from outside the Chantry's gates. Merlinda pulled her thoughts away from the contentiousness of her fellow elders and fastened instead upon more immediate concerns. The bestowal of the embrace upon her apprentice. Focusing her consciousness upon the glyph she had placed over the door to her laboratory, Merlinda scried the room in which Durant even now busied himself with his preparations for the ritual of the embrace. She watched with approval as the young apprentice arranged the pewter bowls which would be used to contain his lifeblood. Once Geraint paused to take a deep breath, visibly forcing himself to relieve the tension manifest in the taut muscles of his neck. His lips moved slightly, mouthing the words of the oath of loyalty he would recite immediately after his transformation. Merlinda nodded to herself as she watched him for a few more minutes. Satisfied with what she saw, she severed her connection to the scrying device and returned to the task of answering the pleas of both Atreus and Gortrix. Geraint returned just as Merlinda finished pressing her gold signet ring into the daub of wax on the second scroll. Tomorrow, one of her retainers, not Geraint, would see to their delivery. "Are you ready?" she asked her apprentice. Geraint nodded. "I am, my lady," he replied. "All has been prepared as you have ordered." "Does the thought of eternal life prove daunting, now that you stand ready to receive it?" The apprentice turned his face toward the window. The town of Durham now lay occluded in the darkness that followed the setting of the moon. Why try again for Glastonbury? Why search for the Sangreal when the cup of immortal life rests here, within my grasp? Merlinda rose. "And have you no fear that this path leads to your soul's damnation?" Geraint smiled faintly. "You offer me eternity in which to reflect upon that question," he replied. Merlinda nodded, satisfied. "Then let us proceed to my sanctum, where you will drink from the cup of bitterness and strife, of joy and learning. From this night forward you shall stand among those who have embraced the outer darkness in pursuit of the inner light. Tonight, through me, you become one of the children of Tremere."